Money is the reason this world runs, whether take industries, food, countries, all is done because of money. Same can be said for terrorist organizations. Apart from bombings, shooting, if you look at bigger picture, you will see that all of this is made possible because of money, whether from buying weapons, paying the fighters, paying for food. All of this is made possible by the money supplied to them. That is what we will discuss. Before we move on, remember the purpose of this video is to understand how money works in these terrorist groups, not to target a specific community or religion. It is difficult to say exactly how much money terrorist organizations like ISIL make each year, as they do not publicly disclose their financial information. However, estimates vary widely, from tens of millions of dollars to billions of dollars. For example, the International Center for the Study of Radicalization and Political Violence, ICSR, estimated that ISIL generated between $870 million and $1.9 billion in revenue in 2016. The ICSR also estimated that ISIL's peak year of earnings was 2014, when the group generated up to $1.9 billion in revenue. It is important to note that these are just estimates, and the actual amount of money that terrorist organizations make each year is likely to vary depending on a number of factors, such as the group's territorial control, its ability to engage in criminal activities, and its level of support from sympathizers. As we know that to stop financing of terrorism, international community have imposed many restrictions like freezing the assets of these organizations and their leaders, and prohibit financial transactions with them, travel bans, ban on buying weapons. But still we see that these organizations somehow manage to not only avoid these sanctions, but still continue to perform their activities without any halt. The reasons can be control of territory. When these groups control territory, they can tax the local population and businesses, and exploit natural resources such as oil and gas. ISIL controlled a significant amount of oil-rich territory in Iraq and Syria at its peak. The group smuggled oil out of this territory and sold it on the black market. Criminal activity. These groups often engage in criminal activities such as kidnapping for ransom, extortion, drug trafficking, and smuggling. ISIL kidnapped thousands of people, including journalists, aid workers, and civilians. The group demanded ransom payments for their release. ISIL also extorted money from businesses and individuals in the territories it controlled. But if you take example of Hamas that is banned and sanctioned all over the world, but still managed to fire thousands of rockets, then another significant reason can be support of a country which help it to give access to money and weapons. That is the reason ISIL was not able to survive, because it never had any support of a country, unlike Hamas and Taliban. Now before we move on, remember we are here to talk about how they make and keep money, not to go in politics. But without any doubt, sanctions have helped to stop the financing of terrorism. However, it is difficult to quantify the impact of sanctions, as there is no consensus on this issue. Some experts argue that sanctions have had a significant impact on terrorist organizations, while others argue that they have been less effective. However, there is evidence that sanctions have made it more difficult for terrorist organizations to raise money. For example, financial sanctions have made it more difficult for them to access the global financial system. Travel bans have made it more difficult for them to coordinate attacks and recruit new members. And arms embargoes have made it more difficult for them to acquire weapons and other military equipment. The conclusion of all this is that sanctions have been effective in disrupting the financing of terrorist organizations, but they have not stopped them altogether. Terrorist organizations continue to find ways to raise money through criminal activities, donations from sympathizers, and operations in areas where the government is weak or corrupt. The international community needs to continue to work to disrupt the financing of terrorism. This includes working to identify and freeze terrorist assets, and to prevent them from accessing the global financial system. It also includes working to counter their propaganda and to address the root causes of terrorism.